I'd like to posit something. Andrew Lloyd Webber's Love Never Dies is Reptar on ice. Like, for real. For those not in the know, Love Never Dies is Andrew Lloyd Webber's sequel to his 1985 hit musical The Phantom of the Opera. The story centers on the idea that, after being, hunted down by that angry mob and vanishing at the end of the last musical, he found his way over the ocean to Coney Island in New York, and now runs a world-class freak show in between writing kind of boring, generic arias and brooding about Christine. Christine, meanwhile, is now married to Raoul, who, for some reason, became a massive prick in the 10 or so years since the last musical. She also has a son, who turns out to be Christine and the Phantom's secret love child. The Phantom lures Christine to the island, they have a conversation about the night they totally did it, Raoul bets his marriage on whether or not Christine will sing, secret love child gets his hair stroked, Meg Giry gets her character destroyed, and love does, in fact, actually die. Or at least, Christine does. A couple things before we, really get started with this. One, I'm using the Australian production here, primarily because it's, the one that was filmed and the one that looks pretty. And it's 1,000 times better than the original London production, but it's still Love Never Dies, and, that makes it still crap. So just be aware of it. Don't be deceived by how pretty it looks on screen. Two, I am a massive fan of The Phantom of the Opera. I wrote my college essay on The Phantom of the Opera. It's the first musical I ever heard when I was 5, so when Love Never Dies came out, it was less oh god, what have you done, and more this is a personal affront to me and my life. Which I know is irrational, but we all have our things. 3. What does this have to do with Reptar on Ice? Well, Reptar on Ice is the tragic story of a misunderstood singing ice skating monster and the nameless woman who falls in love with him. The show was featured in an early episode of Rugrats, a show which dared to ask the question of what would babies say if we could hear them talk? How bizarre would the world be from the perspective of a not yet fully developed brain? And how truly batshit can you manage to make your hair? To this day, the Reptar on Ice episode is well known for being one of, if not the best episodes of the show's run, and is fondly remembered as an example of how the 90s were the greatest thing ever and everything today sucks. So, with that in mind, I repeat my original thesis. Love Never Dies is Reptar on Ice. But, without, the big green monster. Or the ice. Though, I wonder if the Phantom could ice skate. To start, I guess we should probably start with the characters. Reptar on Ice stars a misunderstood monster desperately trying to make his way in a world that hates and fears him simply for being who he is.
I'm just a dinosaur. I don't know what I'm for. I like to stomp and roar. Hey, I'm just a dinosaur!
He's just a dinosaur! Similarly, Love Never Dies stars another misunderstood monster desperately trying to make his way in a world that hates and fears him simply for being who he is.
In him my wrongness is made right, and yet he loathes me just the same.
Naturally, his solution to this is to move to Coney Island and break it to vaudeville, unlike Reptar, who mostly just smashes things. Though, the Phantom's pretty good at that too. To be honest though, in Love Never Dies, the Phantom isn't really the Phantom. In the original musical, and of course in the original book, which everyone should read, the Phantom was this malevolent presence that struck fear into denizens of the opera without even needing to be seen. For most of the show's opening, we only know of him, we hear whispers about him, we see the repercussions of crossing him, and we hear his otherworldly voice echoing around as if it comes from everywhere at once.
I'm here, the Phantom of the Opera. I'm here, the Phantom of the Opera. I'm here. I'm here. I'm here!
In Love Never Dies, the Phantom is the very first thing we see. And for some reason, in the 10 years between the two musicals, all the subtlety and eeriness that made him, him, is gone.
10 long years, living a mere facade of life.
Crumple that paper, Phantom. Crumple it. Now, gesticulate wildly as you tell us in no uncertain terms exactly what your mental state is. Now, for the record, Till I Hear You Sing, which is the musical's opening number in this version, is a really gorgeous, though kind of generic Andrew Lloyd Webber ballad. The problem with it is mostly that it establishes what kind of character we're going to be looking at for the rest of the play.
My broken soul can't be alive. Oh.
Rather than being given this mysterious, eerie, but ultimately kind of tormented guy, we're given, basically,
I'm just a dinosaur. I don't know what I'm for. I like to stomp and roar.
he's just a dinosaur. Another thing to consider is that in both stories, the protagonist is initially considered to be dead by his supporting cast.
We thought him dead.
Reptar's gone.
Then of course there's the fact that both protagonists choose the most flashy and ridiculous way possible to prove that they're alive again.
The most dazzling ice extravaganza of the year.
What the hell? She was just minding her own business and then suddenly what the hell? To be fair, I've been told I have this effect on people as well. God damn it! So we've got our tragic, misunderstood monster protagonists, both of whom like to cause mass destruction and chaos wherever they go and have their own theme song, but secretly are sensitive souls, just trying to find someone who understands. Which brings us to the love interest. The love interest is very important in stories like these because it is ultimately only her that can see past the protagonist's dark, mysterious, often murderous exterior to the calm, sensitive soul beneath. Okay, so let's face it, neither of these women have terribly good taste in men. And, I know that love... No, we are not doing that right now, okay? Just no. Alright, so, I know that love...
Never die.
No! What did I say? Just... hang on, Okay. So, I know that love works in mysterious ways, but look at the Phantom. In the first musical, he hypnotized her with his voice while stalking her through a mirror he apparently set up in her dressing room. He regularly fucked around with everyone in the opera, blackmailing the management and the performers alike before eventually resorting to murdering them in cold blood and bragging about it in the middle of a ballet, after already having set the opera house on fire and presumably in that process killing even more people. Then there was that time he tried to kidnap her and force her to marry him or he would kill her boyfriend. I can't imagine that was particularly fun, not to mention all those times he just generally tried to destroy her life and the lives of those around her. And that was just the first musical. In Love Never Dies, he lures her to Coney Island by sending his flamboyantly dressed henchmen to pretend they were sent by Roger Hammerstein. He threatens to kill her son unless she sings for him, then makes a bet with her husband over who gets to sleep with her without her involvement in any way, shape, or form, and of course, upsets her delicately balanced married life by forcing her to remember their one night of heated passion. And my God, is that a punishment. Beneath a Moonless Sky is supposed to be the big first act love ballad of the show, sort of like... But for a song that can basically be summed up as, hey, remember that time we totally did it? It goes on... forever.
I touch you,
And I felt you. And I touched you,
and embraced you,
and I felt you, and I kissed you,
and caressed you,
and I caught you,
and I kissed you,
and I took you,
and I begged you, and I loved you. Yes, I loved you.
and I loved you,
And I loved you.
and I left you.
And I loved you.
You gotta think eventually they're gonna run out of things to say about it. And we did this, and we did that, and intercourse was had. But no, because immediately after that's done, they launch into a new song, in which they sing basically the exact same thing.
Once upon another time, our story had only begun.
Like, this entire sequence can be summed up in this very short conversation. Hey, Christine, remember that time we had sex and then I left you?
Yeah, that kind of sucked.
Well, I still miss you. Sorry, I'm kind of married. I see. It could be so simple. Of course, things are complicated by the fact that apparently the night they totally did it was also the night that Christine's son Gustav was conceived. And now the Phantom must deal with the fact that he has a son. This is, of course, another plot point they blatantly stole from Reptar on Ice.
It looks like Reptar, but it's too little. Hey, maybe it's Reptar's baby. Reptar's baby? Wow.
So yeah, nice job, Mr. Webber. Which of course brings us back to the key point that I am trying to make here, which is that love never... No! Just no. Love Never Dies is basically just Reptar on Ice, with some more impressive costuming, decent set design, and obviously, I hope, not made for kids. You've got the tragic monster protagonist, who at the beginning everyone assumes is dead,
We thought him dead.
Reptar's gone.
who is in love with a beautiful woman,
Lost love.
and then turns out to have a son.
You left me with a son.
We better get Reptar his baby before he falls asleep too.
And in the end, we never really get to see their love come to fruition because something disturbs it. In Reptar on Ice, it's the babies coming out on the ice.
What's a dinosaur to do when there's kids on the ice?
And in Love Never Dies, it's because Christine, dies. But of course, at the center of it all is the story of the woman who falls in love with a monster who could kill her at any second. A narrative that we all know and is really hard to do without, all kinds of disturbing implications. Beauty and the Beast pulls it off, but of course, in that story, Belle doesn't actually start to like him until he stops acting like a monster and starts acting like a man. Twilight tries to pull this off, but of course doesn't really do it very well since Edward remains, through the entire series, super creepy and controlling. One of the reasons why the Phantom of the Opera sort of works is because it shows us this narrative in a way that it kind of realistically should happen. The Phantom remains a monster, a murderer, and a madman, and in return, Christine does not fall for him because he is crazy. By presenting the Phantom as this misunderstood, creepy Edward Cullen kind of guy, and allowing Christine to eventually run off with him, it robs the characters of their strength, particularly Christine, whose entire personality is now basically just...
They say he's a menace, but I love him.
So good job, Mr. Webber. You've created something that can be summed up with the same level of depth in 11 minutes on a cartoon about talking babies from the 90s. I'm sure you're very proud.
Reptar, he's no ordinary monster. He's a lizard with a heart of gold.